You're very welcome to another episode of the Scaling Your Business podcast. For this episode, I'm delighted to welcome Lorna Lawless, the coaching psychologist at Next Level Coaching. Lorna, you're very welcome to the show.
Thanks very much for having me, Rian.
Yeah, tough to have you. Typical fashion of this podcast is we go back right to the beginning, early influences, and then work our way through kind of challenges, pivotal moments, and lots of value throughout. So
Sounds good.
let's do no different here. You grew up in Dublin. What were your early childhood days like growing in Dublin? Any fond favorite memories?
Um, yeah, fun favorite memories of Marley Park. I grew up in Rathfarnham, but I was quite young, I suppose, when we moved to Kildare. And my childhood memories of moving down to Kildare at first was like, I mean, it was like moving to the back beyonds for me, It was only little, but there was, the carrot, no pun intended, of myself and my sister got to get a pony. So,
Nice. That's pretty cool. I'd trade
yeah,
that.
that was good. That was the one thing Mum and Dad were like, oh, if we could maybe look at it because it was never ever going to be a possibility in Rathfarnham.
Yeah.
So I suppose we just kind of it changed the direction from being a suburban city kid to all of a sudden a country person. And my parents have no background with horses or anything, so from a very young age, I don't know if you have horses or any of your listeners, but they're fairly full on. It's not like having a dog that you just have to walk once a day, or. So from a young age, it was a lot of responsibility straight off. But I do feel that kind of forged a hardworking mindset as well.
Mm.
You'd be up early before school, milking out, feeding the horses, riding out, whatever. And the same then on weekends, you didn't get to go to sleepovers or stuff like that with your friends because you had to be home. My mom wasn't going out feeding the horse or anything.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah,
Proper
I
hard
do think
work.
it solidified it from a very young age. It was good.
I actually grew up next to a horse racing track, Fairy House. I'm on the
Oh,
outskirts of Dublin
okay.
in Ratoath.
Yeah.
Our school, secondary school, wasn't built at the time. So the first year I spent at school on a race course. So like English class was like the bar, but PE was just to run a lap of the race course. I'll never forget that. Every like Tuesday we had to go out and run a lap, which was torture. Um,
Yeah.
Early days, sticking with early days, young Lorna, who do you think had the biggest impact on you or influenced you the most while you were growing up?
I would have to say my family, my folks. We are lucky we're a close knit family.
Hmm.
Dad never really not that he would be he never shied away from making you work, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
My dad is self-employed. He's a heating engineer and plumbing business. From the age of 14, I was brought to work with him on summer holidays. There was no sitting around for the summer. I'm only thinking of it now. My nephew was just after getting his summer holidays from school, and I was thinking, oh Jesus,
Are you going to bring him out to the farm to take care of the horses?
I was put in the van, the next Monday. But
Yeah.
again, really good. It instilled a lot and a hard working ethic, and as I suppose, as I said, that kind of translated going on then as an influence now because my dad always encouraged me to work for myself and he said if you can and when you can set up your own thing and be self motivated, be self driven in that matter. And also, there was no jobs that were, oh, you're a girl, you can't do it, you
Mm.
know. Yeah, it was plumbing, but you were bought the Snickers and the boots might have been two sizes too big for you. But so yeah, my
Nice.
my my dad had a very heavy influence on me in terms of my work ethic and the mindset that I have today.
Sounds like you were brought up by a good set of parents.
Yes, absolutely. Last.
Psychology was something that you studied. Where did the interest come in psychology? Was it something you put down on your CAO?
Yes, yeah, I just always had an interest in people and listening and speaking, and I do think it's a natural strength that I have as a communicator or a listener but doubled up with it, I do enjoy it, So I yeah, always had it. I never really kind of thought that I would get the points or anything like that, to study it. So it was kind of a hope and a wish, but I did, and I loved it. With the degree, I obviously did it with the Open University, so I worked full time, which came with its own challenges. I felt I probably didn't throw myself into my uh, BSc as much as I did the masters. The masters was a totally different experience because I gave up work for the year and I moved down to Cork and I got to do the whole actually being in a brick university with classmates around you all the time and like-minded people. But the interest in psychology, I suppose, yeah, it just comes from a kind of a natural strength that I managed to carve into a career.
A couple of things I know about you from doing some research. You've been to places like New York. I don't know if you are or not a dog on. You've
Yeah.
gone to gigs like Kings of Leon at Slane. So I'm curious to know what's one thing you're into or curious about that not a lot of people would know about you.
Wow. Okay. So something that not a lot of people would know. I play the violin.
Nice.
Yeah. Not extremely well, but proficient enough. But it's something that yeah, definitely not many people would know. I got a violin. I inherited a violin from my grandmother, and
Did she
it's
play as well,
beautiful.
obviously?
She did. It's the only, I think, asset she had going into her married life was her violin. Someone at some point, it wasn't her, obviously, but someone has scratched into the back of it May 1886. So
Wow.
it's a very old instrument, and I'm very lucky to for it to have been passed on to me. But yeah, I suppose that's something that not many people would know. Other interests you would know just from a quick, I love jujitsu. Um, I've started kind of developing more into that side of it. But there's yeah, in terms of things that people wouldn't know, that's probably a good one.
You said that psychology was something you put on your CAO, so it's obviously been an interest for a while. But
Yeah.
other jobs, Frank Keane, BMW, online editor for books.ie.
Mm.
Um, did you take any lessons from those jobs, potentially human behavior, that you can use in your current role?
Absolutely everything, and I do. I often kind of thought, in my early 20s, I sometimes regretted not doing college full time from the start. But now I really, really appreciate all the lessons that I learned from the variety and of work that I did whilst financing my degree. Really, I loved the from the online books with irishbooks.ie. Shout out to Alistair, who I'm still in touch with. And I learned so much there. That would have been the first kind of online platform, and kind of learning to navigate websites and also develop customer account relationships and stuff like that. So that was really beneficial for me. It was that next step up out of just retail work, that you would have done in your late teens.
Mm.
um and then with Frankine BMW, just, I mean, a wealth of knowledge there when it comes to working with a global brand and their, customer services, and how to deal with a certain level of customers, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Now your gig is next level coaching.
Yeah.
Talk to me. What is it? What is it that you do? What is the business?
So it's my own coaching practice. It's just me, myself, and I. I set it up in 2016 or 2017. It I do one-to-one coaching, I do group coaching, and I also do a good bit of associate work with other coaching companies around Dublin and the UK.
Amazing. One of the things you've talked about in some of the videos I've watched is, and that caught my attention, which is why I'm asking it first, is flow states.
Yes.
And that in flow states, three things can happen. I could pronounce these wrong, but neuroanatomy, neurochemistry, and neuroelectrical waves.
Yeah.
For
correct.
anyone like me who has no clue what that means, can you explain what first the flow state is
Yeah.
and then those three things that happen?
Yeah, for sure. So I became interested in flow states. It was the main focus of my research thesis for my master's degree. So I researched MMA athletes' experiences of flow states. The reason why I was interested in it was I was doing a master's degree in positive and coaching psychology. So when we're in a flow state where it's, your listeners might also know it as being in the zone or the runner's high.
Mm.
It's just that moment when you're completely focused on what you're doing, and we perform at our best. So it was a natural kind of area for me to be interested in when it comes to performance psychology or coaching. Um, so when we are in a flow state, as you mentioned, three kind of major changes happen. A lot happens really, but from a neurochemical perspective, when we're in this moment of deep absorption and kind of engagement in the task at hand, we have certain neurochemicals that show up. So there's a combination of five. We've serotonin and anandamides and endorphins, norepinephrine, and one more that will come to me now in a minute. But these are all performance enhancing neurochemicals, and they're actually, you know, replicas of some popular street drugs, if you know what I mean. And so
Yeah.
we know that these all would drive attention and focus into the here and now, and they make us feel good. There's a hedonic pleasurable feeling that comes with them. So when our brain is naturally producing these chemicals purely due to the activity that you're doing, it becomes quite an addictive state, quite a feel good, as I said, hedonic state that we kind of tend to seek again and again and again once we have experienced it. So that's the neurochemical. From the neuroanatomical point of view, that's just different parts of your brain that are active or engaged. So we used to think that it would have been, you know, the old adage of you're firing on all cylinders. So we would have thought when we're in this peak performance state of mind that there's loads of different things happening at once. But what research actually shows in the fMRI, which is functional magnetic resonance imaging, which are the lovely, you know, the images of the brain, and we can see where the different blood flow is going. So therefore we know what areas of the brain are engaged. We know that they're actually the prefrontal cortex, which is this big area across the, you know, behind your forehead. It is responsible for a lot of higher executive cognitive functioning. So you're thinking and, you know, forward kind of planning, all this time is calculated across your prefrontal cortex. So it actually begins to shut down when we're in a flow state, because basically our brain is like a big energy hog, right? It's only like 3 pounds, but it takes up 20% of our body's energy. So it's always looking for ways to conserve energy. So your prefrontal cortex shuts down simply because your brain is trying to focus on what you're doing. So it doesn't have time to be thinking about everything else. But when that begins to shut down, that's why time is perceived differently when we're in a flow state. So sometimes it speeds up, sometimes
Yeah.
it slows down. So that's kind of from the neuroanatomical point of the different areas and why it feels like a different consciousness, a different state of mind. And then finally, our neuroelectrical changes happen. So we go from this, like our waking state, to we actually drop down the electrical waves in our brain drop down to almost like a daydream state. So again, it's a little bit paradoxical because you would think you're firing on all cylinders, but in reality your brain is doing a lot to work at just putting all its energy into focusing at one task. So as a result we see these changes.
You work closely in MMA. Have you ever had anyone say to you, and this is just a wild guess, that they can almost kind of see a shot land before they
Yeah,
see a shot land as a result of being in that flow state?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Extremely
Well.
common. Extremely common. Nearly see them happening
Mm.
before the shot is even being thrown. Yeah, when they're just in that moment. That and it, you know, there was a lot of interesting research that kind of came, or interesting points that came out of that research in terms of like when you watch an MMA fight, you'll often see coaches or corner people on the side and they're shouting instructions and all this. But if that fighter is in a flow state, chances are they don't hear anything, because they're just so clearly focused at what they have. Now, the more professional you get, the more used to it you are, the less your brain has to give it all, it's all. So I'm sure those guys are used to hearing their advice from the corner being shouted out. But particularly it's worth noting for amateur or novice fighters.
That makes sense, because I want to touch on fighting for a second, but I have a friend who's a professional swimmer. Well, he's retired now, but he represented Ireland in the Paralympics and got a bronze. And I went to all his events, and he said, I said, what's it like when you come out get on the thing to jump into the pool, and you hear all the crowd? And he says, I can't hear anything. All I'm concentrating on is getting to the thing to jump off, and I can't hear any noise. I don't notice anything. When I'm like, that's a lie, because there's so much noise going on. It's deafening. But he says, no, I don't pay attention to any of that, which is strange. I'm obsessed with MMA, watching it every weekend. Big fan of the UFC. A lot of the Irish fighters, Kiefer Crosby, James Gallagher, Keane, all those guys. And I love seeing them succeed. You've worked closely with the best out there, John Kavanagh, on his Wimped Warrior program. Can you tell anyone who's not familiar with Wimped Warrior what it is? And then, are there any moments throughout working with people on that program that blew you away, kind of standout stories that you can openly talk about?
Yes, I can openly talk. Obviously, I cannot allude to who.
You can't say names, but you can show what impressed you.
So, yeah, okay. So, first off, for your listeners, Wimped Warrior is a transformational mixed martial arts based program. So, it is 20 weeks long. You train 5 days a week. It is intensive, but at the end of it, you have the option of competing in an amateur bout. So, you actually get to make that walk to the cage. And it is in the sense of like an opportunity. It's fairly outstanding, as you know, most amateur fighters will be at least 2 years training before they make that walk or they book a fight, on a fight night. So to do it within 6 months it's quite an achievement. The stories that come off Wimped Warrior are like, I could sit here all day, Rian, and tell you about the transformations that I have seen, either working with people from the get go, and across the kind of 20 weeks. Really, it's. I mean, the physical transformations are outstanding. It's phenomenal. People are in the best shape of their life, as you would be, getting up to train at 6 in the morning, 5 days a week for an hour and a half. And then on top of that, because it's, again, as I said, the flow states, it becomes quite addictive. People want to do more. And anyway, so it's quite intensive physical training. But the mental changes that take place are outstanding. People's confidence just soar because you're putting yourself consistently in uncomfortable situations and stepping outside of your comfort zone. I have seen people. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to think now of an actual story that wouldn't kind of allude or give away any like personal details.
Well, no, you said there that you've seen people.
Just hypothetically, people.
I was just going to say, you've said you've seen people change physically in shape. That itself is amazing.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think last year's Wimped Warrior, on total, they, like, the group of 60 or something, they lost about 100 kilos between them, a bit more. Yeah, I'm not sure. Like, there's huge transformations. But as I said, it's what happens upstairs that's the big. It really impresses me, And when I began coaching on it, what kind of drew me in was this like consistent journey so far, like where people could really see a difference between themselves, between 6 months ago and who they are today. Not a lot of us can say that. Not that we can't say it. I mean, we're always grown, but it's not. We don't always have this. Am I gone all funny again?
No, you're still there.
It came up unstable for me, but it comes up. Sorry, I'll just start that reply again. The physical transformations are very impressive, but it is the mental ones that impress me more, and I think are longer lasting. So there's very few things in life where we can say, right, from today until 6 months down the line, I will be a different person physically and
Mm.
mentally. I will, there are so many areas that I'm going to grow in. I may not recognize myself or the person who first walked through that door. So, it was true. Wimped Warrior. Then I was really kind of impressed with this, and I was like, wouldn't it be cool if we could measure the, the mental changes that take place as much as we can measure the physical ones? As I said, we know, oh, you've lost so many kilos or inches, or you can lift 20 kilos now, whereas when you started you could only lift 10. Whatever it is, it's easy to measure physical improvements. It's not so easy to measure what you can't see, so the invisible, your mental changes.
Mm.
So it was through that I became a qualified assessor in the mental toughness, the suites of psychometrics, so MTQs, and that's now the main focus of my practice. Is
Amazing.
yeah,
So something else you've spoken about in the past before, and it stood out to me, was that personality traits are plastic.
yeah,
50% of them are genetic.
yeah,
Uh, what I hear is that there's a potential to teach old dog new tricks.
absolutely, absolutely. So our brains have this wonderful ability to remold and reshape themselves as time goes on, depending on what you're asking of it. So with intentional effort, we can, our brains will physically change, much like a muscle. I always kind of compare it to a bicep or abs, whatever it is that you're
Mm.
looking for. The more you train it, the stronger it becomes. So for instance, you could have neural path. This even comes down to your thinking style and our mindset. So you could spend your whole, and you could, okay, let's say you are, as we said, 50% is what you're born with, right? To me,
Mm-hmm.
you're either an optimist where that's glass half empty or glass half full. But to me, that's 50% that you are left with then, and that is of your choosing. So yes, some people are born naturally more mentally tough, so they will have natural higher levels of confidence. They might be naturally good at sticking to their goals, or they enjoy taking on a challenge, and all of these aspects of mental toughness might come to them. But it doesn't mean that if you're not born with it, if you are born a little bit shyer than the rest in groups, or more comfortable in your comfort zone than stepping outside of it, or not great at sticking to your plans, it doesn't mean that it's not, that you can't develop these skills. You absolutely can, and we've proven time and time again that they're very coachable. The first step is to become self-aware of where you're at. So
Mm. What's your favorite aspect of what you do?
seeing the changes in people, having that first conversation with someone and they're being really hard on themselves and saying, I can't do it and I'm stuck, and I don't know what to do next. And just throughout the process of a few conversations and trying to help people switch up this negative mindset. Like so many of us, Rian, engage in daily self-talk where we absolutely berate ourselves and put ourselves down, and we're either not aware that we're doing it, or we're not aware of the fact that we can stop doing it.
Mm.
And I am of the personal opinion, if you are saying anything to yourself that you wouldn't say to somebody else, so try your best to stop saying it, because it's going to have a huge impact. We don't realize, I think, the weight of the words that we say to ourselves.
Yeah, also potentially worth looking at, and counseling is not a bad word. Like I know so many of my close business friends, including myself, that will go to it weekly and none of us are in a depressive state, but to keep on top of ourselves so we can be the best version of ourselves. So if that's entering your head, look at it and find someone out there that you could potentially work with. But
Mm.
uh, there's lots of research out there that suggests that on average nowadays, I think the research was in the year 2020, that humans in the Western world will see somewhere between 6,000 to 10,000 adverts daily. That's a lot of adverts to look at daily. Um, I don't know if this is in your realm, so I'm happy to move on if it's not. But
Mm.
if I was to say, how could we improve our focus and intention? taking the fact that there's so many things trying to distract us, like the 10,000 ads daily, what would you say back to me?
So our focus, and yeah, okay, it's not really my realm, but I'll give it a crack. Um, as I said, it is where our attention goes is where our energy flows, if that makes sense. And I know, as you're saying, there's so many things that pull our attention and pull our energy in different directions. There's not many things we can do about that, but we can become aware of our own behaviors. So, for example, if you find that you're being distracted from a project that you want to accomplish, I'll use a proposal or something, right, that you need to get in, but you find that you're not doing it and it's weeks and weeks and weeks have passed, and instead of like blaming the advertisements there, see, this is where self-control comes in and self-awareness. So I do think if you find that you're being distracted to the extent where you're not getting your own stuff done, then you need to look at changing something. So like, where, think about it, where are you going to get most of those advertisements? Where are you going to see them?
Probably your phone.
On your phone. So what can you do?
Stay away from your phone or limit your phone to certain hours. Yeah.
There's simple things that, like, we're not always at the mercy of our environment. We can begin to control
Yeah,
a
yeah.
little bit. And there's so many simple things that we can do. Like technology, I know, yes, it bombards us with stuff, but there is also little steps in there that are there to protect you. You know, you can get an ad up, a pop up ad blocker. If you're working on a proposal, shut down your emails. Don't have social media going. Um, if you want to listen to music in the background, have your Spotify app. You know, don't have YouTube on. Anything that you know is heavily dense with ads or anything that's going to pull your distraction or your attention away and distract you. Um, you have the power to shut that down. I often think about this about people who are having toxic social media times. I'm like, just like block that person or mute them, or the
Yeah.
amount of friends that I have, and they'd be plagued. They've seen this, maybe it's with an ex-partner or it's someone from work or whatever it is. I'm just like, there is a button there. Like, there, you do have the power to hit that button and to unfollow or mute or whatever it is that's upsetting you or taking your mental space away, disturbing you mentally, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's in your personal life or work, in the sense that you're feeling distracted or you're not as focused or concentrated. Remember that there's a lot there that we have the power to do. We just don't always act on them.
I like that. If restrictions didn't exist and you could travel anywhere in the world right now, where would you go to?
It would have to be to see my sister in New Zealand.
Well, a long flight, but beautiful place.
Long flight, very beautiful place. Yeah. I was supposed to go May last year. I had my ticket booked and everything. I've been over to her twice now. But yeah, absolutely. She'd kill me if I said I'd go anywhere else.
um, what was the question? Oh yeah, investing in yourself. Any books, podcasts, mentors you go
Yeah.
to continually upskill and invest in yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Mel Robbins is my number one.
Yeah.
If you're familiar with her, or your
Mm-hmm.
coach, your people listening, she has an excellent TED talk called The 5 Second Rule. She has a book corresponding to it. I just find her amazing. She's a really big influence on me. Her message is simple, it's to the point, it's positive. Um, so yeah, I would highly recommend that if any of your listeners are looking for someone to follow. She's got loads of stuff on Audible as well, which is great, along with her books.
One of the questions I ask guests at the end of the podcast is, if your house was burning down, all your loved ones to save, you could save one item and one item only, what would that be? I feel like your answer would probably be the violin.
Yeah, absolutely.
So my final question to you is, I'd like you to imagine we're now in the year 2030 talking to one another,
Okay.
and you're looking back on the past decade. Answer this professionally or personally or a combination of both. What would you like to be looking back on, pretending that now is the year 2030 and you're looking back on the last decade?
There's so much already. I would like to be looking back on the journey of, this the true nerd in me now, but my PhD. I'm really looking forward to starting that hopefully this year and finishing it as well. So could take me 10
Well,
years, Rian. You never know.
it will be an achievement when you get it. Yeah, you've
Yes.
already achieved a lot in your life. So yeah, from my end, I've thoroughly enjoyed spending the last 30 minutes chatting to you.
Yeah, me too.
And I wish you nothing but the best going forward.
Thank you very much, Rian. I've loved chatting with you.